is back with you once again, and as promised, I'm finally going to come through for you today. For 2 weeks now, I've told you that I wanted to do a little bit of an analysis on Herman Cain and his politics and what he believes, and maybe do some analysis on whether he would be a fitting president or fitting candidate in 2012. And the best laid plans of mice and men sometimes blow up in our faces. We've had a couple of news stories come out that have kind of precluded us from doing that. We've been talking about Donald Trump and birth certificates and Osama bin Laden being killed and all sorts of things, to where we really kind of had to put this off a little further than we wanted to. But today we are here. We're finally going to do it. So those of you who have been looking forward to this, I appreciate your patience, and we're going to go through with this today. First of all, just a brief reminder of what we're doing in case you are new to the America's Evil Genius program. A quick reminder of what we're doing with all of the serious Republican presidential candidates leading up to the 2012 primaries. I have said in the past, and I believe most people would agree with me, that the Republican field in 2012 and the prospects for the Republican nomination in 2012 is such a wide open race. And there's really not even a true prohibitive favorite, and there's going to be so many people potentially involved in it that it might be a little bit difficult to really tell the differences between all these different people that are undoubtedly going to show up in the thing. So what I've attempted to do is to find a way to kind of break this down and understand the beliefs of each of these individual candidates in some key areas, and assign a letter grade to those areas, and develop kind of a grade point average, a GPA, in order to mathematically and numerically separate these candidates and see who I feel is best. We did our first analysis of this nature with Donald Trump a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to do Herman Cain next. Before we get started, just a reminder of the 5 areas that I'm rating these candidates on. These are what I consider to be the 5 most important issues, the 5 most important areas for any presidential candidate. And I've said all along, I want the candidate I endorse, the candidate that I support and that I vote for, I want them to be as close to my viewpoints on these 5 issues as possible. The 5 issues are a dedication to smaller and less government, illegal immigration, the war in the Middle East, free market economics, and a focus on American culture and American exceptionalism. Those of you who have heard me before are familiar with those 5 areas. Those of you who are new, that's kind of the playing field, if you will, that we're going to be working on. Those are the 5 issues that I consider to be the most important, and I'm really not going to do a lot of analysis of issues that are not related to those 5. So if your pet issue isn't on there, I'm probably not going to talk much about it. If you're one of those people that's in favor of, legalizing marijuana, sorry, I'm not going to talk about it. I really don't care. So if your big thing is global warming and environmentalism, sorry, I'm not going to talk about it. I don't really care. Those are 2 examples of issues that will not sway my vote for or against a candidate one way or the other. So, you know what we're dealing with. You know what we're doing. Those of you who saw the Donald Trump presentation have kind of seen one of these in action before. So now let's go to Herman Cain. Now, first of all, to preface this, a lot of you probably have not heard of Herman Cain in the past. Indeed, before I started this program, I had barely heard of him. I'd heard the name. I didn't know a lot about him. You'll recall in I believe, AEG number 2, we talked a little bit about a situation he had run into after a speech of his at the CPAC convention, where some liberal bloggers had really taken him apart and really shown the bizarre worldview of race and culture that some on the left have. And we talked a little bit about Herman Cain in that respect. And I must say that through that process, I learned more about Herman Cain than I'd ever known before. So it kind of piqued my interest in him a little bit. So I suppose I must say that to Chauncey DeVega, the pseudonym of the blogger who really ripped Cain a new one after that CPAC speech, I guess to Mr. DeVega, I have to say thank you, because you gave me an opportunity to learn a lot more about a particular candidate than I'd ever known before. So maybe there's some good that comes out of this. So that being said, Herman Cain is not a household name. However, and you will not be seeing his sound bites on the cable news shows, or you won't be seeing him appear on a lot of places on television. However, if you are interested in knowing his opinions and his viewpoints on any number of issues, It's really not hard to find that out. Herman Cain, for the last several years, has actually posted a lot of articles on online magazines and print media, print magazines. So Herman Cain's viewpoints, in his own words, are out there. They are not difficult to find. So if you wonder what he believes on a certain topic, you're really only one Google search away from it, or one Bing search away from it, or whatever search engine you use. It's not that hard to find. So I was pleasantly surprised to see some very straightforward and direct answers to some of the issues that I have questions on about all of the candidates. So let's start with the first issue, the dedication of smaller and limited government. Where does Herman Cain stand on that? Now, as I said earlier, Cain's viewpoints are out there. They're in his own words. We're going to do a lot of quoting from those tonight, and you're going to hear some of his own words. And on this topic, I want to take you back a little bit. If you remember when the Tea Party first kind of got going, and we started talking about fiscal responsibility and less government and all of those things, and I'm talking about 2008, right after Obama was elected, a lot of the criticism that we got at that time from bloggers and liberals and whomever was that how can you Tea Partiers possibly stand for fiscal conservatism and smaller government when you were all behind George W. Bush, who was anything but a fiscal conservative, and who grew the government? Now, as much as I hate to admit it, and as much as I hate to give the liberals any credit, there was actually a shred of validity to that criticism of us. Yeah, that was true. George W. Bush was anything but a small government guy. He was anything but a fiscal conservative. And yeah, a lot of us, myself included, well, I think we were aware of it. We didn't really harp on that like we should have in the days that Bush was in office. But I was pleasantly surprised to find that Herman Cain was one of the few people in the public eye who did publicly disagree with George W. Bush on some of his bigger government initiatives. Take into account this piece from townhall.com, and this was a piece written by Herman Cain. This is November 8th, 2006. And in this piece, Cain takes Bush to task for compassionate conservatism. Now, what was compassionate conservatism other than a catchy phrase for George W. Bush and Karl Rove? Well, according to a University of Texas professor named Marvin Olasky, who wrote a book on the topic, he defines compassionate conservatism as the theory that government should encourage the effective provision of social services without providing the service itself. So, it's not saying the government's going to directly provide a safety net, but it's going to facilitate and make sure the safety net is there. In other words, it's essentially saying the Republicans can do big government better than the Democrats can. And so, not exactly real conservatism. But at the time, you didn't see as much criticism of the Bush administration for this as you should have, but Herman Cain was one of the few who did criticize them. Consider what he said in November 2008, and I'm quoting here. Bush's big government policies have certainly transformed America, but they are not even in the same neighborhood as true limited government conservatism. Worse, the president, his advisors, the Republican National Committee, and the Republican leaders in the House and the Senate have alienated the party's conservative base of activists and voters. Hey, he was saying in 2006 what a lot of us have woken up and started to figure out in 2011. He was about 4 or 5 years ahead of the curve here. He was absolutely right. He goes on to criticize the No Child Left Behind Act, accurately pointing out that it further consolidated federal oversight of education. He criticized the Medicare plan. Let's give you the full title here: Medicare Prescription Drug Improvement and Modernization Act of 2003, Medicare Part D, which just completely increased what we were paying in that regard. So, and really increased that social program. So, Herman Cain was out in front of this. Herman Cain was criticizing George W. Bush for his expansion of government before criticizing George W. Bush for his expansion of government was cool. You know something? That says a lot. He was going against the grain at that time in terms of the Republican Party, in terms of a lot of Americans in general, but history has shown he was absolutely right. I give him a lot of credit for that. So to me, that's very impressive. There is, however, one thing we'll talk about here in a little while that does take away from the grade I'm about to give him in this area. We'll talk about it when we get to free market economics, but again, he was out in front of all of this. The grade I'm going to give Cain is a B on this, on smaller and limited government. I give him a B. I did not give him an A, and you're going to see why here in just a few minutes, but a B on smaller and limited government. My second hot button issue, illegal immigration. Where does Cain stand on illegal immigration? First of all, again, in doing some research on this and looking this up, Cain, in my view, appeared to be very strong on this topic. He did not mince any words, and he made his point rather clear. I'm going to look at an article that appeared on csnnews.com, and this is dated April 28, 2011, so this is not, this is a fairly recent article. And here is Cain's take on illegal immigration. He says, secure the border. I mean secure the border, not to pretend that we want to secure the border. Secure the border. Number two, enforce the laws that are already on the books, and in order to enforce the laws that are already on the books, I believe that we need to make it easier for employers to hire legals. Right now we've got too much bureaucracy. People are fighting the national ID approach. We already have a national ID. It's called a driver's license. So Herman Cain then goes on to say we need to empower the states to do what the federal government won't do or can't do. Empower the states, give the power to the states to deal with the problem. So he's hitting on all cylinders right there. First of all, he actually realizes it is a problem, unlike our current commander-in-chief. And more to the point, he wants to go after every part of the problem, including securing the borders. That's a lot more than I've heard some Republicans say about this. He recognizes this for the criminal problem that it is, and he wants to approach it accordingly. The one thing he doesn't really talk about much, or that I didn't see a lot of reaction to, was the question of what do we do with the illegals that are already here. I would like to see him talk a little bit more about that. But needless to say, the position he's taken on illegal immigration is just about as strong as I've seen any serious candidate take. So I'm going to give him a tremendous grade there. I'm going to give Cain an A on illegal immigration. I think he's right on the right track there. Thirdly, the war on Middle Eastern culture. Let me preface this by saying that some of you might be thinking, with the killing of Osama bin Laden earlier this week, some of you might wonder if this particular issue still should have the importance that I've placed on it previously. I believe that it should. Everybody worth their salt, up to and including President Obama, will tell you that the death of Osama bin Laden does not end the war on terror. Threats are still out there. Hopefully this has been a significant moment that will greatly reduce those threats, but the threats are still there. And this conflict will continue. And, you know, I said something a couple of weeks ago in the Donald Trump analysis that you guys are very familiar with my viewpoint on the war on Middle Eastern culture. I think it's a very expansive war. I think it will take place for the remainder of our lifetimes and probably longer. And I believe it's much more than just a war against Al-Qaeda or much more than just a war against the Taliban. It's a war against a particular culture. And I made the statement during the Trump piece that I was not sure if any candidate, any mainstream candidate, or any mainstream politician within either party truly understood the depth and the true pervasiveness that this war must have. So that was the mindset I had when I went into researching Herman Cain's viewpoint on it. I must tell you I was pleasantly surprised. I had kind of lost a little bit of hope that someone within the realm of politics truly understood the overriding nature of this war, but I think Herman Cain might. I'm going to take this from a piece by Daniel Larison in something called Eunomia, and it was, I'm not sure what that is, but that was printed in the American Conservative magazine. And Larison writes a rather critical piece of Cain because of his viewpoints on this war, but he does put some quotes from Cain in there, and reading the quotes on their own merit, I must say I'm impressed. Here's what Cain said about the war on the Middle East. Firstly, he says, and I'm quoting here, "I support the surge in Afghanistan, but I would have sent those troops in earlier than the president sent them. I don't know, because I'm not privy to all of the intelligence. If we can win in Afghanistan, if we can, then I would never have announced a withdrawal date. And so the first thing I'd do is summon the experts to find out if we can win. If the answer is yes, what is it going to take? And I'm not going to broadcast it to our enemies as to when we're going to get out of there." That's impressive. I mean, we had all this talk about timelines and when are we bringing the troops home, and Obama said that, Democrats said that all throughout our military involvement in the Middle East, and a lot of us on the right, and certainly I, believe that to work off the basis of timelines or end dates was only playing into the hands of the enemy, because now they would have a benchmark. Now they would be able to essentially wait out the clock. You know, it'd be like a football team that's got a lead in the last 2 minutes of the game. You work the clock. That's all our enemies would have had to do. But Cain realized that, and he realized that you don't give them that vital piece of information. And then he spent some more time explaining his views on the war on terror. And this is what impressed me. He says, and I quote, "We're going to be in this war forever." I thought I was the only person saying that. Wow. I mean, I don't know that I've heard a Republican say it that bluntly. But he's absolutely right. We are going to be in this war forever. This is a battle between cultures. This is a battle between two ways of lives. And I'll tell you right now, they, meaning our enemies, view this as a holy war. Their mindset is to not only destroy Americans and kill Americans, but they want to destroy our culture. That's what this is about. And I think Herman Cain gets it. As for his views on the military in general, he says, and this comes from an old Facebook page that he had, and Larison quotes it in this piece. He says, "A strong military, defense spending should be used more effectively, but never cut below 4% of the GDP. The fight against Islamic fascism is global. Fight it wherever it is a threat to the United States of America. Let our intelligence agencies do their jobs." Bravo. That sounds a bit like the Bush Doctrine. And you know, the death of Osama bin Laden has proven to me, as if I needed proof, that the Bush Doctrine was right. It was so good that Obama followed it. He would never really admit it, but he did follow it, and it did come through with the death of Osama bin Laden. A lot of the information, some of the information we got that led to this, came through the enhanced interrogation techniques that were so decried by the left. But here Cain says, let our intelligence agencies do their jobs. Bravo. Don't worry about whether we're subscribing to some arbitrary set of rules that our enemies care nothing about. Get the job done. I believe that's what Cain wants to do here. Now, this Larison person goes on in this piece to essentially trash that viewpoint, but I would have a much different reaction. This is exactly what we need to hear. Now, I know some of you in the Tea Party movement do not agree with me on that. Some of you in the Tea Party movement will not agree with Herman Cain on that. A lot of you want us to reduce our spending on the military. A lot of you want us to reduce our military focus. But I'll tell you right now, that's where I disagree with a lot of you. If my viewpoint on the military sounds a little bit like neoconservatism, it probably is. If Herman Cain's viewpoint sounds a little bit close to the Bush Doctrine, it probably does. And I think if at any point in history we can look and say the Bush Doctrine is right, I think this week is the week we can say that based on the events surrounding Osama bin Laden. So, you know what? He does sound like George W. Bush, and on that policy, you know what? That's a pretty good person to sound like. So, for the war on Middle Eastern culture, I give Herman Cain an A. Well done. Number 4, free market economics. As I mentioned before, Herman Cain was a successful business person in several different areas. So that certainly would lead one to believe that he would do well in the avenue of free market economics. Cain called out Obama on his budget in a piece in the Free Republic that he wrote on April the 13th. And he writes, meaning Obama, his budget employs the typical class warfare tactics, insisting on taxing America's job creators into oblivion for what he deems fairness. In doing so, he makes clear his willingness to further cripple our economy in exchange for pushing his wealth redistribution agenda and abandonment of the free enterprise system. He goes on to say that he, meaning Obama, again insisted on saddling America's debt creators with an even heavier tax burden to pay down the debt. Meanwhile, Congressman Ryan, Paul Ryan that is, proposed his own budget that reduces the national debt by $6 trillion without raising taxes on a single American family or business. So there's, in a capsule, Cain basically saying and calling out Obama on his wealth redistribution policies, on his persistent class warfare that he's now worked into the budget, or trying to work into the budget, and essentially saying that you don't better the economy by raising taxes, you don't better the economy by punishing the rich. Instead, you better the economy by allowing an environment where business can flourish, where people can take risk, where people can invest. So that I find very encouraging. And who would know better than Herman Cain, a man who turned around Godfather's Pizza from the brink of extinction and made it a profitable company, and a man who has experienced success in business at almost every level. So that I thought was very encouraging. However, there is one misgiving that I have about Herman Cain here, and that this is part of the reason that I downgraded him a little bit on smaller and less government, and I think it's going to come into play here as well. There is a piece on UnitedLiberty.org by a gentleman named Jason Pye, P-Y-E is how you spell that last name, Jason Pye, entitled, "Why I'm Not Excited About Herman Cain." And in this piece, Jason Pye mentions and tells the story that Herman Cain was in favor of the Wall Street bailout. Pye's words are this, I'm quoting here, "He backed the Wall Street bailout, or according to Cain, the recovery plan, as he called it on his radio show. Cain wrote that nationalizing banks is not a bad thing. He even went as far as criticizing opponents of the bailout, calling them free market purists, and absurdly claiming that no valid criticism had been brought forward." Well, I kind of am a free market purist. A lot of other people in the Tea Party are as well. And some of you might remember my saying that one of the things that really lit me up in terms of having a political interest was when we did go into the bailouts in the Bush administration. And any liberal will tell you that Bush did the bailouts first. Well, that's right, he did. And I told you before that the alarm bell for me went off when Bush advocated the bailouts. John McCain stopped his campaign to go to Washington and work the bailout plan through. Obama was for the bailouts. He just wanted to do them a different way. And all that time, there were polls saying over 50% of the American people said, to hell with the bailouts, let the banks fail. That was my real wake-up call that, holy crap, Washington is working against us. So to hear that Herman Cain was in favor of the bailouts is a somewhat troubling thing. Now, I understand that since that time, Cain has gone on to criticize Obama for his bailouts. And make no mistake, Obama's bailouts were much larger than Bush's by a very substantial stretch. So it does make me wonder, if Cain has changed his tune on that. Was he for it before he was against it? Well, I guess if that's so, then, that couldn't necessarily be criticized. I guess we all do change our opinions on various topics over time. Maybe that's what Cain did. Or I wonder if Cain's misgivings about Obama's bailouts are just because of the size of them. Because, Obama's bailouts were huge. Bush's bailouts were big. Obama's were gargantuan. So is Cain's trouble with the bailout simply the size of the bailout? Or has he evolved to a way of thinking that bailouts are wrong, period? there's also been some talk that Cain does not necessarily agree with all the end the Fed people, that the people who claim that we need to end the Fed, and Cain is repudiated that. He does not believe in that. So on free market economics, I'm going to give Cain a C here. But I would say this: if he can better explain his advocacy of the Bush bailouts, I might be able to raise that to a B. But right now I'm going to give him a C, and this is part of the reason that I downgraded him to a B in smaller government, because there was that nagging thing there that he was in favor of the Bush bailouts. So he kind of got dinged in a couple of areas for that. But outside of the bailouts, I think there's a lot of positive things there. But the bailouts are a pretty big thing to overcome. Okay, finally, focus on American culture and American exceptionalism. And you guys know that I kind of put social conservative values in that category too. First of all, I've got to say that every politician at some level talks about American exceptionalism. But when I looked up Herman Cain's viewpoint on it and his words on it, I saw one of the best definitions for the term. I saw one of the best discussions of the term that I've seen any candidate put out there. He wrote a piece in the March 2011 issue of Freedom Watch. And I'm going to quote from that piece on his definition of American exceptionalism. American exceptionalism is the standard that our laws reflect the understanding that we are afforded certain God-given rights that can never be taken away. We know that God, not government, bestows upon us these inalienable rights, and because of that, they must not be compromised by the whims of man. This makes us a unique nation, a nation that remains, as President Ronald Reagan once said, a model and hope to the world. That's as good of a definition of American exceptionalism as I have ever seen. He's right on target with it. Now, he goes on to talk about Barack Obama saying that I believe in American exceptionalism just as I suspect the Brits believe in British exceptionalism and the Greeks believe in Greek exceptionalism. Essentially saying that we're no different from other countries. But Cain retorts that by saying, and I'm quoting again, Americans know better. We see American exceptionalism not as an empty cry for nationalism, but instead the blessings of God that keep our nation strong, independent, and free. We see the American story as one of tenacity and triumph, not as one inherently flawed and in need of rewriting. We recognize the times we have stumbled, but are assured that it is not due to weakness of our foundation, but instead the imperfection of mankind. Wow. That tells you in a nutshell the difference between how conservatives see this country and how liberals see this country. Conservatives see our occasional stumbles as illustration of mankind's weakness. Liberals see our stumbles as a way to criticize our very foundation. That's a profound difference. He goes on to talk about how conservatives see American exceptionalism. Conservatives, quoting again, conservatives see America as exceptional because of our shared belief in the dignity and creativity of the individual. We know that it is innately human to work, to risk, and to dream. We understand that these virtues, coupled with the conditions American exceptionalism provides, allow us to enjoy the economic and social mobility that other countries envy. Liberals lament that such success wasn't guaranteed. At its very core, progressivism rejects American exceptionalism. Folks, this guy gets it. Herman Cain gets it. He understands not only that America and our culture and what we've developed is a beacon to the world, but he understands why. He can articulate it better than most anyone in the Republican Party, or darn near anywhere else for that matter. In addition, he's not afraid to mention his faith and belief in God and in Christianity. The man is a associate pastor or assistant pastor, one of the two, at his church. He is not afraid to tell you why he believes what he believes. He's not afraid of social conservatism. He doesn't run from it. He seems to be one of the few people out there that understands that social and fiscal conservatism work hand in hand, and that they are essentially the same thing. That if you're socially conservative, in likelihood you're going to also be fiscally conservative. It's a part of an overall moral well-being. I believe that Cain gets that. I'm very comfortable with him on this respect. So my grade on American culture and exceptionalism for Herman Cain is an A. So what's the final grade? We've gone through all of his grades here. B on smaller and less government, A on illegal immigration, A on the war in the Middle East, C on free market economics, A on American culture and exceptionalism. Average it all up, you come to a 3.40. It's pretty encouraging. You recall when we talked about Donald Trump, I think he was at a 2.6, and I said at the time that I didn't find that number encouraging, that I wanted a candidate that was over 3, at least. Well, Cain has surpassed that quite nicely. Much more impressive than Trump, and in terms of pure numbers, that's probably going to be a hard number for any other Republican to beat. You know, I'd like to see someone challenge it, I'd like to see someone prove me wrong there, but right now, 3.4 is a pretty good number. So what I'd like to see in seeing how impressive Herman Cain is, now that we've gotten to go through his words, now that we've gotten to go through his beliefs, now that we've gotten to go through where he stands on what I believe are the key issues, and we've seen that the message comes through in shining colors, I'd like to see him get a little bit more face time. I'd like to see his message get out there, because I think as well as he articulates this message and as right on the button as this message is, I think if the American people start to hear this message and see this message, it will resonate. You know, I'm not going to come out here and endorse someone right now. It's too early for that. I told you I'm keeping my mind open. But I've got to say, with Herman Cain, the man impressed me. You know, his viewpoints are not out there on television. They're not necessarily easy to find in the sense of, I'm just going to go turn on Fox News and hear him. But if you do just a little basic amount of research, you'll see what he believes, you'll see what he stands for. I'm impressed. I'm impressed. So, I think he set the bar in terms of what he believes. I think he set the bar pretty high. I'll be interested to see if anyone can eclipse it. And I would be interested to see if we can somehow get him out there in the spotlight to get these views going. I mean, people talk about how Donald Trump kind of got a lot of buzz going and got a lot of people behind him. And so much of that, I believe, is because he is out there in the media and he got his viewpoint out there, and people respond to the fact that Trump minces no words and is very upfront with what he believes. Herman Cain has a very similar delivery. He's not going to sugarcoat what he means. He's going to be upfront with you. He's going to tell you what he believes and why. The only difference is he has not had the spotlight. If he gets the spotlight and people hear this, I think it's going to resonate. So thumbs up to Herman Cain. I'll be keeping an eye on the other candidates to see if they can approach him or even eclipse him. So, that's our analysis for this week. A lot of things to think about and talk about, a lot of information to digest. I know I gave you a lot, but I think you can handle it. We'll be back next week with another episode. Don't know what we'll talk about yet. There's a lot of interesting things out there. The first Republican presidential debate is Thursday night, which is tomorrow night from when I'm taping this. So I'll be interested in seeing who all shows up for it and what positions they take. Part of that overall approach of kicking the tires of all the candidates on the Republican used car lot right now. And so we might talk about that, I don't know, but then there's continued fallout from the Bin Laden thing, and who knows what we'll talk about. But there's a lot of interesting topics out there. So we'll approach that next week. As always, any questions or comments, you have my email address. Until next week, Godspeed.